Welcome to Stories My Mother Told Me. The title of today's story is Zara and the Tyrannical Ruler. In a distant village, the world was ruled by a tyrannical king named Dugard. He had absolute control over every aspect of society. His people lived in constant fear, their every move monitored and their freedoms stripped away. Amidst this oppressive world, there was a young woman named Zara. Zara's parents were killed several months ago because her father dared to refuse a king's order to take over their only piece of land. She was left behind to care for her little brother. All alone in the wicked kingdom, she learned to fend for herself and her brother from a very young age. She would go harvest vegetables from the garden behind their home and sell to neighbors. Her brother, on the other hand, would stay at home and take care of the house while she was away. As Zara delved deeper into the resistance, she discovered the true extent of the Dugard's cruelty. Innocent people were imprisoned, tortured, and silenced for daring to speak out against the regime. The more she learned, the more determined she became to bring out change. This continued for a very long time, and they both became independent and figured life out as they grew. Zara had always felt a burning fire within her, a desire for freedom and justice. She would constantly remember the way her parents were killed right in her presence. She also couldn't bear to see her fellow citizens suffer under the guard's rule. Determined to make a difference, Zara joined a secret resistance group known as the Liberation. The Liberation operated in the shadows, working tirelessly to undermine the Dugard's control. Zara quickly became an integral part of the group, using her intelligence and resourcefulness to gather information and plan covert operations. Together, they fought to restore freedom and equality to their world. One day, while training alone in the woods, she found a young man who has been wounded and severely injured. As she approaches to render help, she realized that it was the prince, the only son of King Dugard. Listening to her instincts, she left the prince alone, hoping he would die in pains. But after walking for a few minutes, her heart kept pricking her and urging her to do the right thing. So she headed back and administered first aid to the prince, and she carried him on her shoulders back to their hut. When she got home, she told her brother all that happened, and he commended her for displaying a good heart, but they all decided to keep this a secret. Later that evening, the leader of the liberation group, Larry, came to see Zara to discuss their new discovery. While they were talking, they heard the prince utter a loud cry. They both hurriedly went in to check him and saw him bleeding profusely again. Zara helped him with some herbs her parents owned, and as soon as Prince Richard saw Larry, he pretended to fall asleep. Larry asked surprisingly what the wicked prince is doing at her home. Having no other option, Zara told him all that transpired. Larry was very mad at her and asked that they kill the prince and leave his body in front of the palace gate. But Zara bluntly refused, and a serious argument ensued. While they were arguing, Larry said he has fallen deeply in love with Zara and he would love to marry her. And seeing the prince in her house makes him jealous, and he suggested taking the prince to his home to look after him. Zara was surprised at the sudden confession, and she told him that she had a lot of things to accomplish first before thinking about love. She also wouldn't want to put his life in danger, hence she'd rather take care of the prince. After much argument, Larry went home. As soon as Larry left, Richard opened his eyes and was able to utter 5 words. Hide me away from him. She couldn't understand what he meant, but she and her brother decided to carry out his wish. When night fell, they moved him to their grandmother's hut and asked that she take care of him. As soon as Larry left them that evening, he met the chief's advisor to the king. He told him that Prince Larry is not dead, but he's healing at Zara's home. So they plotted and agreed to attack Zara and kill the prince. It turned out that Larry is the son of the chief, who is disguising as an ordinary man seeking to help the villagers get justice. But in reality, they are trying to usurp the throne and hold the villagers hostage. The chief, in fact, is the brain behind the tyranny the people are experiencing. That night, Larry and his men from the Liberation attacked Zara's house in disguise looking for the prince, but they couldn't find him. One of the marksmen threatened to kill her brother if she don't tell them where the prince is hiding. But she and her brother unanimously said the prince had escaped as soon as Larry left, and that he even left them a note to thank them for their hospitality. They showed the notes to the marksman, and they left, convinced with their story. After they left, Zara and her brother were wondering who the men were and how they knew that they had the prince. They eventually concluded that they were from Larry as he was still having a hard time knowing the prince is brought to them on a platter and they cannot do anything about it. All the same, they had an even stronger conviction to keep the prince safe. The next day, she visited the prince at her grandmother's hut and saw he was doing better, but he still couldn't speak or narrate what happened to him. Her grandma asked her to trust their instincts to keep the prince safe. One fateful night, the Liberation executed a daring plan to expose the guard's atrocities to the world. Zara infiltrated the heart of the king's servants and guards who were dying from the oppression as well. Her aim is to gather evidence of their crimes. She promised to transmit the evidence to every corner of the globe and involve leaders from nearby communities. Meanwhile, in the palace, the king has been bedridden for some years. The chief has conspired with the other chiefs to take over the throne, and the only way to do this was to kill the king or get rid of him. But every attempt to kill him keeps failing. Eventually, they gave in to their last resort to slowly poison the king and turn him into a vegetable. They employed the service of one of the servants to induce the king's food with the poison. And gradually, he started losing all his organs and completely became speechless. Since then, they've taken over the rulership and oppressed the people. This revelation shook Zara. She gathered that the king has been dying slowly and that the advisor has been the one ruling the kingdom in his wickedness. She also found out from one of the servants who would dare to speak that Larry is the son of the chief who was born and raised in the neighboring village. He also told her that the prince had been in prison for as long as his father has been sick. But all of a sudden, the chief asked that the prince be taken into the forest and killed. Unfortunately, the prince is now gone, so he said. And they strongly believe that the evil chiefs are ready to execute their final blow. Zara hurried back to her grandmother's hut and revealed all the shocking things she had heard to her grandmother and her brother. While they were yet speaking, the prince came from the bedroom and said, I feel better now, and thank you for your hospitality. I am ready to go back. I am ready to go take back the throne and ease the pain of my people. Zara asked in pretense what he meant by those words, and also argued that he and his father has been an oppressor. The prince shook his head and sighed, and then he sat down to narrate the whole ordeal to them. He confirmed all that Zara had investigated, and what is more, Zara's parents were actually killed because they knew about Chief Nika's dishonesty and greed and threatened to expose him. In the midst of the chaos, Zara promised to join forces with the prince to stop this evil from continuing. But how can they achieve this? Larry had already brainwashed most of the Liberation members, and they all see him as a savior and a light. And he had also paraded himself as a messiah in the community. Hence, it will be difficult to turn the people against him. After much deliberation, they decided to play along Larry's game and promised not to reveal any of the discovery to him. The Liberation Group always meet every other day, and today was such. At the meeting, Larry told the group of the plan to attack the palace, kill the king, and crown him as their new king. Meanwhile, in the palace, Zara had gained the trust of the two servants that she spoke to and asked that they swap the poison they feed to the king with an antidote that her parents had. And gradually, the king was getting better. After some days, the king could speak and sit. So Zara was snuck into the palace by the prince, and they secretly met with the king and told him all that had transpired and how the chief and his son is planning to take over rulership. They told him of how the people are currently suffering and living in bondage and how everyone thinks he is a horrible king. They also told him all they are doing to make sure everything returns to normal. And in the meantime, he should pretend that he is still unconscious and dying. The king told the prince to travel to the neighboring village where his mother was and seek help from the king, while Zara, on the other hand, was secretly winning over the hearts of the Liberation members. The day finally arrived when Larry and his men intend to attack the palace. Zara was placed second place after Larry because of her bravery and courage. When they got to the palace, Larry spoke with a loud voice. "We want the king dead. We need a new king. Enough of this tyranny." And immediately, the soldiers from the other village came out and surrounded Larry and his men. He was surprised at how many there were, but he wasn't worried at all because he was confident at his trained men, and he immediately gave order to his men to attack. However, to his surprise, they all pointed their arrows at him and seized him. Zara immediately came forward and shouted, "These evil men have been the brain behind our suffering and oppression." The villagers present were surprised at this revelation and were wondering among themselves what is going on. That very moment, the king and the prince emerged, looking hale and hearty. The chief and Larry were flabbergasted. Immediately the king shouted, "This wicked Asper and his puppet son Larry, seize them and throw them into the dungeon." The king immediately sent word to the entire community, and when the people gathered, he addressed them and told them how the throne was usurped and also promised to make their village the happy place it used to be. He also publicly praised Zara and accorded the success of that day to her bravery. Emerged as a symbol of hope and resilience, Zara's bravery inspired countless others to join the fight for a better world. Zara's journey from a young woman yearning for change to an icon that every young person in the village looked up to and emulate. The oppressive world she once knew was transformed into a place where every individual had the right to express themselves and live without fear. And so, the story of Zara and Tyrant Ruler came to an end. This is story my mother told me. Bye, and look forward to seeing you in our next story. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.